Okay, so now we have our bowl that has been drying overnight. This is the one that was just thrown yesterday on the wheel. And it's dried to the consistency that Donna needs in order to put her design into it. And remember that we're making a yarn bowl. And so she's trying to get it basically to come out similar to this yarn bowl. And one of the things that was happening with these yarn bowls is that the corners of the cut for the yarn to come through were flopping forward. Now remember that that design is actually carved in when the clay is leather hard. So leather wouldn't necessarily be able to stand up straight like that with just limited support the way that this has. And so that's what was happening, is it was just kind of flopping over the side. Now this one's not going to do that because it's been fired the one time already. So Donna came up with this idea rather than leaving points on the corners where she's kind of rounded it out this way instead. And that has really helped with any kind of warping, I guess you would call it, of the sides of the bowl.
So this time what we're going to do is we're going to cut, but we're going to stop our cut right here at the base and maintain this base intact. And that's going to hold the two pieces together.
The rim, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So Donna has basically just made a hole, kind of almost like you would with a drill or something, but it wasn't made with a drill. It was made with a round tool. Okay. Is that a pottery tool specifically?
Yes.
Or? Okay. And then she drew with a pencil.
Yep.
And so now she can cut, and you'll be able to see it's still pretty clay-like. Maybe a little bit harder than the way the clay comes.
Yes, but it's it still has it still can crack on you. So you have to be very careful.
And careful of your fingers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see what goes into these things. I mean, that's all being done by hand. It's not like there's machines that you're just like punching things out with, or, you know, that are doing any of the work for you. This is really, you know, something that's just entirely done by hand. A lot of handling of the clay and a lot of understanding of what the clay is going to do at each stage. And no guarantees that it's ever going to behave exactly the way you think. Different factors go into the drying. Some days are more humid than others. Mm-hmm. Some days obviously much more warm than others. So, yeah, something to really pay attention to. Takes a lot of thought and a lot of time. And so now we didn't see the procedure where you took this off of the wheel. It actually comes off with like a tile on the bottom. There's like a tile that it's stuck to that's separate from the wheel.
Right, yep. And that comes right off with that tile.
And then how do you separate it from the tile? Is there something special
I
you
use
have to
the
do?
little nylon fiber tool to grab it off the tile.
Okay.
And once they get this dry, they really kind of pop off on their own.
Okay. So it's not really stuck on there.
No.
You can see that some of that already is pretty hardened in there.
Yeah.
So that's the wire tool, kind of like a nylon wire that we saw you use at the beginning of the
Right.
video
To cut the clay.
Right, to cut off your 3-pound piece. All right, we're going to check back in with this in a second. Okay, so here we are. She's got about almost half of it. That was cut out, and I was able to remove that whole piece. Looks like she might get another one here as well. So now if this were to dry too much, there's no way you would ever be able to do that. It'd be too hard.
Yep.
Gotcha. And you'd get a lot of crumbling, cracking.
Yep. It would crack.
And if it's too soft, it's not going to stand up on its own.
Exactly.
Where you start cutting and, perhaps where you're holding with your other hand, like right up here, you could probably get a collapse or a buckle. So, you just got to know when it's ready for this kind of work to be done on it. And there's different kinds of clay. What kinds have you worked with, Donna?
I've worked with terracotta. I've worked with brown clay, gray clay, and the porcelain clay is probably the most difficult to work with because it's so soft. So
and that's what you have here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So when you're throwing it, it's really, really soft. So it's hard to make larger pieces from it.
Well, we have looked at a lot of pottery around this area of Virginia that we live in, and there's really no one who is making yarn bowls at all. And I can kind of see the reasons why.
Yeah.
They're a bigger piece. They require a lot of this, hand cutting at this stage. There's a lot of potential for collapse, at which point then you can't reuse that clay, right?
You can't put it back together.
Right. Yeah. Now, if this were to collapse, you wouldn't be able to just form it again like silly putty or something and reuse it.
No.
Yeah. Because it's been wet and re-dried and...
Well, that's not what I wanted to do, but I got the piece out nice and even.
Yes, you did. Okay.
So now what we'll do is I'll take a wet sponge and I'll go through here and you can see I can just even out those lines and kind of fix up my cuts and make it look a lot neater.
Right.
To resemble that.
Right. Now, will you kind of do the same thing that you did with this, where you've got like sort of some curved edges?
Yep.
So you'll kind of work that a little bit.
Yes.
So that'll be a little bit more
I'll
curved.
just actually do a little bit of sandpaper on those ends.
Right.
And make my my curve that way.
Okay. So you can sand it at this stage.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, will you sand all of the imperfections?
Yep.
Out of it?
I will take off the bottom.
Okay.
And just put like a little foot.
Right.
And then I will sand the whole thing down and take out all the little lines that you might be able to see here and here.
Okay.
And when it's done, it'll be nice and smooth, and it's going to turn a whitish. You can see how the rim has dried pretty white compared to the tan.
Yeah,
here.
definitely a difference.
So that's what you're going to see on the whole bowl.
Because the water kind of settles down into the bowl
right.
itself. Yeah.
So now to dry it, I'll turn it over.
I gotcha. Okay.
And I'll dry it that way so that I maintain those two pieces.
Right.
And the bottom will get dried.
Okay. Well, look at that. That looks really, really good, even though it hasn't been sanded out yet. So, next procedure after that will be
It will be the bisque fire.
yeah, the bisque fire. Great.
And once it's done with the bisque fire, then I glaze it, and then the glaze fire.
Okay. So after the bisque fire, it'll look similar to this one because this one's been bisque fired.
Yep.
So that's why it's dry. That's why it has that sound.
The thud.
Much more dull thud. And on that you get the little pinging sound.
And you can
like
see
a porcelain.
how easily this just breaks up into pieces.
Yeah.
But you can see like this
The top was drying.
is a little drier, so that is a little firmer than that.
Right. All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you for showing us.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, so we're back in the pottery studio. And Donna, why don't you explain what has gone on with that bowl so far?
Okay, well, it's completely dry now, and I sanded it so that I could get it as smooth as possible. And right now it measures 19 centimeters across and 9 centimeters height. So it's gonna do a little shrinking when we take it out during the fire. It's gonna shrink. So we'll see what it comes out as when it comes out. So I'm gonna place it in the kiln, and this is called a bisque fire. So when it's placed in the kiln, you try not to touch anything else.
Okay. Will it adhere to something else?
In the bisque, it probably won't because there's no glaze to adhere to. However, it could get a burnt piece on the edge, or so we don't want that. So
okay.
I'm placing it pretty correctly inside, and so you see it's not touching either end, and the other two pieces are not touching the bowl or the kiln.
Okay. And that's a pretty full kiln. You couldn't
Yes.
put anything else now,
No,
really.
I have a shelf that comes with it, but I don't have the posts this high, so these are the only pieces I can put in at this time.
Yeah. So you're probably better off letting it be the way that it is rather
Yes.
than trying to fill it too much. Okay. And what kind of temperature are we going to set on here?
We're looking at, it's going to reach about 2,300 degrees.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so I've got my kiln plugged in, I'm turning it on.
And about how many hours will that take?
This is going to take anywhere from 6 to 7 hours
Okay.
to complete.
All right.
So,
you put all your settings in there, and I'll let you go ahead and do that.
okay.
And yeah, and then it'll just run for the amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So the steps were basically that first that bowl was thrown from a 3-pound piece of clay, and it was just a regular bowl, didn't have the little yarn cuttings into it or anything like that. And the type of clay, that was a porcelain clay,
Yes,
is that correct?
that's porcelain.
That was a porcelain clay. And so after it was thrown, it was allowed to dry for, I think it was about 2 days.
Yes.
And then at that point, it was what Donna was referring to as being leather hard. So it had a consistency somewhat similar to leather. You still need to be careful how you handle it. It can bend, and it can come out not the way that you want it to. So you have to be a little careful how you handle it at that point. But with that consistency, she was able to cut in the design that she needed for the yarn to come out of the bowl, turning it in into a yarn bowl. And at that time, she sanded it as well. So it's completely dry now as far as the clay is concerned, but highly breakable. If anything were to happen to
Yes.
that, it could break very, very easily.
And now you hear it clicking, and that means that it's going to start increasing in temperature. and it's going to go all the way up to about 2300 degrees. And when it's done, it'll start decreasing in temperature. And usually you can open the lid when it gets to be about 500 degrees.
Okay.
And you just kick it open a little, notch it so that some of the heat comes out, and it'll dry quicker. It'll get cooler quicker.
Okay. Yeah. But you would definitely at 500 degrees not want to handle the piece or anything like that. It'd be way too hot.
Way too hot.
For that kind of thing. So once it's bisque fired, it'll be more sturdy, a little more resistant to breaking, a little more like a porcelain or ceramic or pottery piece the kind of consistency that you would expect when you lift it, or when you handle it at all. But you still need to be pretty careful with that.
Yes, it still can crack.
Right.
Once it's got the glaze on, it's a lot stronger, but of course if you drop it on the ground, it's going to crack.
Right.
It's clay,
Right. Right. So once it comes out of the kiln and it cools, the next step is the glazing.
Glaze, and then the glaze fire, and we have our bowl. Hopefully.
That's the plan, at least. Okay, so we measured it. It's 19 centimeters by 9 centimeters. And just about how much shrinkage. Now, it's going to shrink in the heat. I don't know if people realize that, but yeah, I had to learn that too. And I'm sure you did as well.
Yep.
It's going to shrink in the heat. About how much shrinkage do you expect out of these pieces? Maybe about 10% or?
Well, this porcelain is 12% shrinkage.
Okay.
So some clays are 10% and some others are even less, like 8%. But this one is a 12% shrinkage rate.
Yeah, which is, you got to kind of picture that when you're making an item, because unless you want to have a tiny little coffee mug or something, yeah, so you got to kind of picture that. You got to make it a little bit larger because you're going to get that shrinkage when you fire it. So.
And already the kiln is up to 71 degrees.
Yeah,
so
goes pretty quickly. Yeah, all right, great. All right, so after that comes out of the kiln, we'll check in again and look at the next steps. Thanks.
Thank you.